We're going to be talking here about the history of the pro-life movement. One important thing to keep in mind is we are not talking about people who are opposed to abortion. That's a much wider category of people. We are talking specifically about people who became actively involved in the pro-life movement, demonstrated, bought the goods, participated in a wide variety of ways in this movement actively. And one of the things that makes this movement distinctive is it's overwhelmingly a white movement. Now, that's not true for everybody. There are some exceptions. One important exception was Dr. Mildred Jefferson, who was a leader of the pro-life movement in the 1970s, who was an African American. There are other Black men and women who participated, but overwhelmingly, it's a white movement. And it's a movement that thinks of itself as a civil rights movement and often compares itself to the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s of African Americans. The roots of the pro-life movement lie with the Catholic faith. The Southern Baptist Convention, actually, to just give you a sense of evangelicals, to a certain extent supported abortion in the early 1970s, and evangelicals in general had mixed feelings about it. But there was a very strong anti-abortion feeling coming out of the Catholic community. It's sort of a lot of the people who became involved in the anti-abortion movement from the Catholic community had been involved in the anti-contraception movement, the anti-pornography movement, and saw this as an outgrowth of that. Organizations like the National Right to Life Committee were birthed from the U.S. Catholic Conference, and they believed strongly that there was a natural right to life, and that, in fact, maybe that natural right to life could be found in the Constitution. And so, in a sense, Roe v. Wade was wrong, not because it was a constitutional argument, but because it misread the Constitution and did not see that natural right to life there. And in fact, one of the initial goals of the movement is to either get the court to rethink that, or, as that seems unlikely, to create a right to life amendment to the Constitution. And that's a goal basically through the 1970s into the 80s. Building a pro-life movement. And a lot of what begins are grassroots activism by people who often come out of the Catholic women's groups, out of local groups that spring up as they see abortion becoming legalized. And some of their central ideas are about humanizing the fetus, convincing people that fetuses are basically the same as a baby. It's an unborn baby. And there's a variety of doing that, but a lot of them have to do with confronting people with the sight of a fetus. So, for example, there were a lot of preserved fetuses that were kept in jars, partially for medical training, but also people might have seen fetuses in jars in freak shows where sometimes fetuses, embryos, were placed in jars and placed on display in these places. This particular picture is an attempt at making this confrontation. Dr. Robert Stewart trying to shock this state Senate committee in Colorado brings out a fetus from his backpack or bag and puts it in front of one of the state senators and displays it. And so it's that type of trying to create this instant impact, this moment of feeling and recognizing the fetus as a baby. Pictures are a major part of this. And a lot of fetal pictures are taken and put into books, other kinds of presentations, slideshows as a way of presenting that. Films develop over time. And in a lot of cases, what they use as a justification is they frequently compare abortion to the Holocaust, the slaughtering of a people. And in this case, the slaughtering of the people is the unborn. So that comparison is very frequently used and continues to be used throughout the pro-life movement. And a critical part of it is building pro-life spaces. The local groups that they start increasingly bring their pro-life activism to churches. So in a lot of cases, local Catholic churches, a lot of priests had mixed feelings about abortion and about contraception. And so activists play a really important role in pushing them to bring pro-life activism into the church and into the services, putting notices in church bulletins, holding events, doing slideshows, various kinds of ways of bringing it into the church and increasing the church's commitment. And this is, of course, something that is also supported by the bishops, the higher levels of the faith. Entering schools. A lot of schools have junior high school students do speeches on critical issues in society. And one of the issues that a lot of students make speeches about are abortion. And so they will support students who are trying to get information for the pro-life side. And also you have some demonstrations, some speaking events at schools, depending on the schools. And then finally, also sort of through consumer goods, things that you can have with you to demonstrate and to share your feelings. And so one of the critical ones that's everywhere is, they call them precious feet. And those are pins that are feet the size of a 10-week-old fetus's feet. It's based on a famous photograph. And those become a way that you can wear it and symbolize your commitment to pro-life activism. Also, making dolls in the sizes and shapes of fetuses. And you'll notice that these fetuses have been dressed to sort of help increase the resemblance to a born child. They would be used as symbolism for adults, but also to be shared with children. And, t-shirts in a more recent use. Crisis pregnancy centers are a really critical part of the movement, particularly for women, because women saw this as an important thing they could do. Share their knowledge as women about what it means to be a mother, what it means to have a child, and share that with women who are contemplating abortions. And so it becomes a really important form of volunteerism, of activism for a lot of women. A lot of these centers are somewhat deceptively advertised, basically saying, that they'll provide you with free information, free testing, free counseling. Some of them are even more earlier on are more deceptively advertised in a way of trying to lead the person to believe that this may be a place that offers abortions. That changes over time as the laws change. And they feel that this is an opportunity to tell the truth about abortion. And they often talk very seriously about the dangers of abortion, the dangers to the woman's health, showing them pictures, showing them ultrasounds as the technology develops, sharing what they see as the reality about abortion. And sort of the goal here is that it's seen as saving both. You're saving the fetus from the abortion, but you're also saving the mother from committing a sin, a crime, from committing murder. So you're saving both of them. Recruiting evangelicals. Initially, evangelical churches tended to be pretty neutral about this. It's not a major issue for evangelical churches. But there's a grassroots pro-life minority who become politicized by the legalization of abortion. Often they become in contact with Catholic activists, and they take their beliefs and they take them into the churches. Once again, advertise meetings in the church bulletin, hold speeches or slideshows or events at church, share it through groups that are built around your congregation. Between that and the fact that evangelicals are becoming increasingly fundamentalist in this time period, they shove being pro-life as an essential part of being an evangelical Christian for most. And there's a transformation. So, for example, the Southern Baptists go from being okay with at least some abortions to being strongly pro-life and anti-abortion. This film, Whatever Happened to the Human Race, that becomes extremely popular, and for a lot of evangelicals, watching that film is a turning point in their beliefs. By the late 1970s, conservative strategists like Paul Weyrich and Jerry Falwell, who's a religious evangelical leader, begin to realize that you can use abortion as a wedge issue, as a way to unite Catholics and evangelicals into a new moral majority and bring them into support the Republican Party, which is seen as defending the traditional nuclear family, unlike the Democrats, who are identified as being linked to abortion, but also feminism in general, changes in the family life. Ronald Reagan is an important part of this. In 1976, he comes out openly as a supporter of pro-life. And so his campaign and his victory in 1980 really cements the identification of pro-life activists with the Republican Party. In the 1980s, things go further. Now, some of this had already happened. There's a lot of demonstrations in the 1970s. There's some clinic fires where clinics are burned down. But it really escalates in the 1980s, where the focus is much more on direct action. And this may be partly encouraged by the power of film. There's this film, The Silent Scream, which becomes, once again, extremely popular because it uses ultrasound to document what happens during an abortion. And that, for a lot of people who watch it, it's a very emotional experience, helping them to be solidified in their beliefs. Operation Rescue is founded in 1986, and its goal is direct action. Sit-ins, not just demonstrations, but actually bringing enough people that you could actually blockade the clinic and prevent people from getting into the clinic. That you can also sit there and insist on being arrested and flood the system with mass arrests of protesters. Their motto was, if you believe abortion is murder, act like it's murder. So take it seriously, have direct action, directly confront the system. And there's a real escalation of violence. Mainstream movement officially condemns it, but at the same time they will say, we understand why people are this frustrated. So it's sort of a mixed message there. And you see a rise in clinic bombings, in arson against clinics, and this level of attacks on clinics in very threatening ways. At the same time, there is a change in how the movement is working. It becomes clear that they're not just at this point going to overturn Roe v. Wade. But there is a legal case in 1992, Planned Parenthood versus Casey. And what this decision says is that What matters is whether or not a law restricting abortion places an undue burden on the person seeking abortion. And that really changes the standard. And so there's a turn to incrementalist legislation, making small requirements of various types to make it more difficult for women to get abortions. So it's change by change by change. Not a direct confrontation so much, but we'll make this harder and we'll discourage people from getting abortions. And if we do it enough, maybe we'll stop them altogether. And however many we're able to stop along the way, that was seen as obviously a major goal. And then, of course, there becomes a big controversy over what were called partial birth abortions. Basically, it was a method of specific late-term abortion. I'm not going to get into the details of it and the technicalities of it, but it was a fairly uncommonly used procedure. Late-term abortions, actually, I shouldn't even be calling it late-term, second trimester abortions were pretty rare. But this was a specific methodology that was used. And it was seen as particularly offensive for a variety of reasons. And so they're able to actually create a federal ban in 2003 that was upheld by the Supreme Court in 2007. Since 2010s, we see what's sort of called a woman-centered strategy. And what we mean by that is increasingly people talk about that abortion is not just bad for the fetus, it's bad for women as well. And one of the things that is built on is that pro-life activists have been collecting testimonies from women who had had abortions and regretted them since the 1970s. And they have obviously over time collected a lot of these testimonies. And these are women who feel, and they are told, that the abortion that they had experienced had caused them to have something called post-abortion syndrome, which is not a recognized term by the psychology and psychiatric professions. But the idea is that they feel intense shame, intense grief, and that results in all kinds of damage to their lives. And those ideas are used to sort of see them as the second victim of an abortion. It's not just the fetus that is damaged, it's the woman as well. And that's definitely something that is taught at the crisis prevention centers, using as a way to discourage women from going on to having abortions. It also is a period in which there's a real focus on what they call TRAP laws, targeted regulation of abortion providers. Mississippi is a place that does a lot of these. A lot of other states do too. And they make requirements like abortion clinics have to meet hospital grade standards. They have to have a certain width of hall. They have to have various other kinds of requirements that really are only necessary, well, in a hospital, but they're requiring the abortion clinic, even though they're only used for a single procedure, to follow those same requirements. In addition to that, they often have laws requiring that the abortion providers have admitting privileges at local hospitals. And the problem is, at this point, a lot of abortion providers, because it's not safe, literally fly into clinics to do the abortions and then fly back out. They are unable to get admitting privileges at local hospitals, which refuse to give them to them. So theoretically, if that was allowed as a law, it could basically prevent an abortion clinic from operating. Also, there's a series of laws that say that women have to give informed consent, that they have to have a script read to them that tells them about the risks of abortion as perceived by the pro-life movement. They have to have ultrasounds to see the results of their pregnancy. They would have to do these things because the argument is they would not be seeking abortion if they hadn't been misinformed or coerced by abortion providers. So some of the conclusions about this is a movement that sees very strongly that there needs to have state interest in regulating the body, and particularly the female body, particularly the pregnant female body. And that's not just in terms of the pro-life movement. We also see it in laws trying to prevent women from using drugs while pregnant, other kinds of ways of trying to regulate pregnant women and their lives. It tends to see women as being essentially very female, having a maternal instinct that is natural and universal, and that if women are not mothers, if they violate that maternal instinct, that will damage them and cause them inherent psychological trauma. And finally, to survive in the courts, increasingly religious arguments had to be translated in terms that were secular. So whereas it's often a more religious concern that starts, they have to be talked about in terms of medical safety and human rights for the courts to listen to them. And so by 2010, the movement had basically changed the landscape enough that when Roe is overturned in 2022, there are laws all over the country that kick in, basically making it very difficult for women to receive abortions.